The growing connectivity between Asia, the Middle East, and the European Union represents a transformative opportunity for Egypt, positioning it as a vital hub in global trade and logistics. This connectivity offers numerous benefits, including enhanced economic cooperation, increased foreign investment, and improved access to diverse markets. However, it also presents challenges, such as the need for significant infrastructure upgrades, regional political instability, and competition from other emerging trade routes. Ongoing initiatives, such as China's Belt and Road Initiative and many others, highlight the potential for Egypt to leverage its strategic location, particularly through the Suez Canal and its economic zone, which could become a key corridor for trade between Asia and Europe. The Suez Canal not only facilitates maritime transit, but also has the potential for the development of logistics and industrial zones that can attract international businesses. In this new paradigm of connectivity, Egypt stands to benefit significantly, but it must also navigate the complexities of regional dynamics and infrastructural demands. Thus, this session aims to explore Egypt's strategic positioning in this evolving landscape and how to harness Egypt's strategic location to achieve a more integrated global economy.
Good evening, everyone. It's been a long day, and yesterday was also a long day, right? But I'm very glad that you're holding on because the topics are extremely important, and there's this session and another session to come, so keep holding on. All right. Now, this session is about a topic that's often not talked about and not appreciated much, okay? Because the issue of connectivity, okay, when we think of connectivity, we think of phones, mobiles, this is what we have in mind. But what we are talking here about is a much higher and much deeper level of connectivity. We are talking about connectivity between continents. We are talking about connectivity between Asia, Middle East, and the EU. And there are many efforts in the world to increase this connectivity and deepen it, especially, okay, after what's happening in Palestine, okay, and the problems in the Red Sea. But even before that, there are attempts to get together. And these attempts to get together somehow didn't seem to involve Egypt much, even though Egypt is at the heart of it. And we have the Suez Canal, which is the most important maritime route in the entire world. All right. Few months ago, ECS invited ORF, which is a great think tank in India. ازيك يا دكتور? This is by the way Dr. Mohammed Abdel Gawad. He's the vice chairman for investment and promotion at the Suez Canal economic zone. Okay, he is a deputy minister who's actually attending on behalf of Mr. Walid Gamaluddin, and it's always a pleasure to have him. So we have a full panel now. So when we invited people from the ORF, we had meetings together, and in those meetings, okay, we started to show them about what Egypt can do. Okay, and we actually even had suggestions for routes and alternative routes, okay, that use more than one way of commuting, okay, other than the maritime. Okay, we're talking about roads, and we're talking about trains and railways and so on and so forth. And we decided with ORF to work together on this topic very seriously because it's important, and it's important to establish Egypt's positioning. Okay. Before I start with my panel, let me tell you a few things. Let me tell you the questions around which this session is going to rotate about. How can Egypt leverage its strategic position to actively participate in ongoing initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative, among others? What strategies can Egypt pursue to enhance its position and aim for a new paradigm in international trade and logistics? In what ways can the Suez Canal and Suez Canal economic zone be developed, and how can Egypt revolutionize its trade landscape to attract global investment and transforming the Suez Canal economic zone into an international business hub? This is what we are talking about, okay? And we are talking about that type of connectivity that currently exists between different countries. Before I give the word to my very distinguished panelists, let me give you something, a very small brief related to what His Excellency, the Deputy Prime Minister, Farid Kamel Wazir, mentioned this morning when he was here. He talked about the projects that Egypt has in the area of connectivity. And what he said was actually extremely interesting. So let me tell you a few things very quickly. That we are planning to transform Egypt into a regional hub for transportation, logistics, and transit trade. And the Ministry of Transport is implementing a number of strategic objectives in that direction. We are building 7 integrated international development logistic corridors to link production zones, industrial, agricultural, mining, and service with seaports by fast and safe means of transportation passing through dry ports and logistic zones. We're developing a comprehensive plan to establish 32 dry ports and logistic zones across the country. We're planning intermodal connectivity between seaports, dry ports, and logistic zones. And this is done through building 7,000 kilometers of new road, upgrade and duplicate 10,000 kilometers of the existing road network within the National Roads Project, building 35 new road access on the Nile, building 1,000 new bridges, building 2,000 kilometers of express electric railway network, upgrade 10,000 kilometers of the existing railway network, new railway lines to connect dry ports to the railway network nationwide, such as the stations of Kafr Dawood, Sadat, El-Rubeiki, 10th of Ramadan, Bilbais, and El Mansheh, and 6th of October City, building new docks, bringing the total length of docks to more than 100 kilometers at depth, ranging from 18 to 20 meters, constructing 25 kilometers of breakwaters, and deepening the navigation channels to accommodate 400 million tons annually instead of 185 million tons, and 40 million containers annually instead of 12 million containers currently, okay? We are also forming strategic partnership with international major container terminal management companies and shipping lines to ensure receiving the largest number possible of international ships at Egyptian ports and expanding transit trade. The reason I'm repeating these and saying them with those details because I know that these are actually extremely relevant to the roads, the roadmaps, and the connectivity that we are talking about. We have our 4 panelists, and let me start with Ms. Abir Lahita, ladies first, okay? Very important, I will never forget this, okay? The CEO of EasyTrans, please tell us your remarks or impressions on this whole issue from, of course, the angle of the shipment, which is actually your line of work. Please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Abla. I'm very happy to be here, and this is such a crucial and timely topic, I believe, because I think that we tend, when we look at the transport and logistics industry, to see it as an enabler for other industries, to see it as kind of a service provider. But it's my belief that logistics is actually, in this day and age, with many developments that have happened, in itself a driver of the economy. Countries that have successfully leveraged their strategic position as hubs within the global transport network have succeeded in adding double digits to their GDPs. And I believe that Egypt is really in a unique position to do that, and we're a little bit late, and we need to continue to build on the progress that we've made. Within the past few years, the Ministry of Transport, as you mentioned, Dr. Abla, has really put in a huge amount of effort in transforming the infrastructure across all modes of transport. And I think that's a very important step, but it's only an initial step, because infrastructure alone is not enough to create the kind of system that integrates into the world. If we look back at the driving questions and we consider initiatives like the Belt and Road, Egypt has a huge opportunity to be a part of that. Now we have a new opportunity. Just this morning, I was attending a meeting of the BRICS Transport Working Group, and Egypt has just joined BRICS. There are many initiatives beyond infrastructure. Of course, we need to build the kind of intermodal connectivity, but we also need to look at having common digital platforms, at improving efficiency, because that's where the competitiveness really starts to come in for different countries. And there we have a huge amount of room to improve, because our transport costs are high, and the more efficiency we can create through digitalization and through different types of solutions, the more competitive we can be. The other thing that I'd really like to emphasize is when we talk about emerging trade routes and different trade routes, I think we need to recognize that the Suez Canal is and will remain a key transport channel, and possibly one of the most important in the world, or the most important in the world, regardless of temporary geopolitical disruptions. And so we need to be thinking long term. And at the same time, we need to consider that these different emerging trade routes complete each other rather than being a competition. If we talk about hubs and different areas that are also developing themselves in a very big way in transport, Egypt has its own unique value proposition. Part of that proposition is our connectivity to Africa, our existence within free trade agreements, some new developments that will connect us even over roads. It was just announced that there is going to be a road from Egypt to Chad, and the presence, of course, of the SC zone, which I will not speak about.
We'll give him the word as soon as
Dr. Muhammad is here. So just to sum it up, we need to look at the wider enabling environment, and within the transport and logistics, we need to look at it as a holistic system, and how we can fit within different trade flows, how we can take advantage of our unique competitive advantages, and develop digitally, and develop in terms of also human capability, and develop in terms of sustainability, because Egypt has a lot of potential in that area, in addition to infrastructure, which we have made big steps on. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those initial remarks. And I agree with you completely that logistics is not just an enabler, it is a driver in its own right. We do have a lot. We don't communicate it enough to the rest of the world, by the way, okay? And we don't capitalize enough on it. There is a lot of things that are happening, and the world needs to know about them. And one of the objectives of this session is to do that, okay? Now, we are going to proceed with our speakers in the following way. I'm going to start with Dr. Mohammed Abdelgawad, who has a presentation. It's a very long presentation, but what I want from you is within exactly 10 minutes, okay? Within 10 minutes that you're going to go, through it, so that people know what is happening in the Suez Canal economic zone, because it is at the heart of everything we're talking about. Then Dr. Shireen Nagar is going to have also a presentation also within 10 to 12 minutes talking about alternative routes or additional routes, okay, that can help and can connect the continents that people actually don't know about. But it helps a lot what we're doing with the railways and the roads in supporting this plan. And then Professor Harsh is going to talk because he is the Indian expert in this, and he knows what everybody's doing in Asia and trying to connect everybody, but we're not there yet in it, so we have to be positioned there. All right, so we're going to give you the picture and then let you talk about it, okay? So let's start, please, with the presentation. Dr. Mohammed Abdelgawad, the Suez Canal Zone presentation. Can we put it on, please?
Yes, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. And happy to be part of this session, and of course, among such distinguished panelists. And of course, many thanks for the invitation, Dr. Abla, and for the ACES, and for the Cairo Forum for the 3 days, I think, or 2 days lengthy discussions, but very important ones. And as it has been mentioned by Ms. Leheta, it's very timely crucial. I promise you I will not go through the whole details of the presentation, but very important before going into the details of what we do within the Suez Canal Economic Zone to capitalize on what has been mentioned during this session within the introductory remarks of course, Ms. Leheta, and of course with your remarks. Because what has been mentioned about the connectivity and the corridors is also a reflection of the vision that we are having here in order to develop well the Suez Canal Economic Zone. And the Suez Canal Economic Zone in itself goes in line with the country objective in order to have a flagship of a deep and comprehensive localization of industrial development within the Suez Canal corridor and within the Suez Canal Economic Zone. Very important to put in our consideration that logistics is a very vital factor, but it's not enough. It needs also to be linked with the innovation and hubs to be implemented within the zone in itself. And this is what we do. Digitalization is very important pillar. Speaking of the future, and of course, how we can have the enabling factors to enhance investments and to make the proper facilitation to attract businesses. And this is exactly what we try to tackle. The integration in itself, and this is very important to put in our consideration that we are following what we call an integrated approach. Not only an integration between the soft skills versus hard skills, but also an integration between the ports in itself, the industrial zones, and the surrounding communities and cities. Surrounding communities in order to make sure that the required human resources and the human capital is well secured for sustainable objectives, and of course for the facilities and the services related to any business to be enhanced and to be sustained. Of course, we benefit a lot, and we will. This is part of the competitive advantage. Speaking of the long-term vision of the Suez Canal in itself, of course, will remain one of the very important trading routes within the globe. But of course, we need to enhance its competitiveness, and this is what we do even within the Suez Canal Economic Zone and the integration between what has been done within Egypt. The railway network, the routes, the bridge, the tunnels, even connecting the east with the west. There is a new Suez Canal through the railway system that already not has to be established, but we already started that, and we are about to finalize that by next year, inshallah, connecting Sokhna to Alexandria through the railway network, which is also will adding a value. And I think the next presentation by the esteemed panelists will reveal more about the alternative routes and the impact of such routes on the trading system. I'll stop here, but this is just to put in our consideration that we have a clear vision to enhance and to sustain the business within the Suez Canal Economic Zone. And to answer the very important question that you mentioned during your introductory remarks, Dr. Abla, the integration between the Suez Canal in itself and the Suez Canal Economic Zone. This is what we do. Innovation, as I mentioned, as part of our investment attraction and investment promotion strategy is part of it to attract high-scale industries. We already started and finalized deals and leads with some sort of investment for the future, like the data centers. And this is what we do. It's not only about the industry in itself, but the services, which is very important to put in our consideration. And with that, allow me to go very quickly with a very brief slides about the Suez Canal Economic Zone. No need to mention, of course, all of us is fully aware of the map of Egypt and, of course, the map of the Suez Canal and the Suez Canal Economic Zone. But to put in our consideration, this is what we have. And actually, there are updates every day about the number and the amount and the quality of the investment that we are having within the Suez Canal. Currently, it's not only 400. I was reviewing the detailed database, and we happy to share with you that we already reached 500 investment projects working within the Suez Canal Economic Zone. We have 4 industrial zones, and this is, again, what I need to clarify. The integrated approach, we try to, and this is a part of the concept of having the Suez Canal Economic Zone. The proximity of the industrial zone to the port in itself is a facilitation to do business. To attract the investment, they are looking into the CapEx and OpEx, and to be established within the Suez Canal Economic Zone, you will be cutting 60 to 70% from the transportation and distribution related cost. And this is in itself a huge factor to enhance and to attract investment. What we follow to do business within the Suez Canal Economic Zone, we try to tailor our services according to the needs of the investor. Either through what we call an industrial developer approach. So we dedicate a specific industrial zone to be well developed under the domain of one of the key industrial developers, and to promote and to help also such developer to promote for attracting a specific investments according to the master plan. But some investors prefer to have a direct contractual or institutional relationship with the Suez Canal in itself, and this is what we do through our investment arm and the investment hat. So we have multiple hats as regulator, as facilitator, as a partner, and as an infrastructure developer as well. And this is also what we do. So we created multiple hats, multiple arms in order to serve, as I mentioned, the needs of the investors. Again, 4 industrial zones linked with 6 sea main ports. Part of them is East Port Said and the Sokhna, of course, major and famous ports, but not only such 2 ports. Currently, as we speak, as you see, and there is also investments as we go for Al-Arish port due to what we have in terms of geopolitical situation. Also, we are developing well a Tur port, which is a small port in South Sinai, but very important for the service of the area and for the local industries and localization and shipping along with the touristic related services. Again, this is the international statistics about the indicators for the trade and either international trade or seaborne trade, and the number of ships per year that running through our zone, and of course through the Suez Canal Economic Zone. But numbers are sometimes different and differs through to the different reasons that we are having. But this is in general the average within the last 3 to 5 years. Again, this is a very important slide, and actually it takes lots of discussions when we sit with investors about the connection not only between the Suez Canal Economic Zone and the rest of the world, but also the connectivity. And this is a very important dimension for the localization and for the industrial development of a country. The connectivity between different locations and the interplay between the infrastructure development and the industrial development. As you see, and the codes is also a reflection for an impactful investment. The color code or the black color code related to the key surrounding cities and communities, and including in it the universities, the new universities that we are having in each city, which also a source of the manpower and the required labor skills and other services as well. The red color code for the tunnels and the connectivity between the east to the west, and of course the highways, or the blue color code is a reflection for the highways. And this is exactly what the investors will look into, the services that the investor needs, of course, and the related facilitation requirement or facilities that has been required in order to enhance and to sustain the business. Of course, and I think you mentioned, and the other colleagues will mention as well, for what we will do in terms of trade. Egypt has a solid network of free trade agreement, and which also a clear reflection of the vision that the country has or have, but very important to put in our consideration. The diversification of such network of free trade agreement is in itself an opportunity to open market and to have the proper market access. And this is exactly another gateway to enhance businesses and to localize industries. And 70%, at least 70% of all establishments or investment projects within the Suez Canal Economic Zone is to target export markets, and which is very important to put in our consideration how we can make the proper or to strike the right balance between different factors in order to enhance the business, including the solid network of free trade agreements. I need all of us to recognize this is what we are having as a symbol of international players and investors within the Suez Canal Economic Zone, but there are many other players. And this is again goes into what we do currently, and all of us, and I know I'm with an esteemed and great mentors when it comes to the economic philosophy and theory, but supply chain diplomacy is through such players and add to it the local players, and this is very important to consider in order to enhance the doing business within the Suez Canal Economic Zone. I will close by the following. No need to go through the indicators, and this is a very detailed presentation, as you mentioned, but in terms of facilitation, we have one-stop shop system within the Suez Canal Economic Zone, covering currently around 80 to 90 services that we are providing within the Suez Canal. And this is not the end. We are also taking into consideration the needs of the investor for an inclusive, transparent, and of course, fast-track delivery of the service. And this is what we do to digitalize all of our services, not only related to the one-stop shop and the investor-related services, but also taxes and customs. And this is very important to put in your consideration that a huge digitalization platform has been created, and in the upcoming months there will be new announcement about how we can better enhance our services and the impact of going into a digitalized platforms in order to secure the deals and the leads, and of course the required services for and from the investment point of view. I'll stop here because there are lots to say, but this is just to give you a glimpse of what we are doing within the Suez Canal Economic Zone. We're happy to answer any question and also to reflect on any of your points. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed, and we'll come back to you with another round of questions. But thank you for talking about the integrated approach that you are adopting, And absolutely, the industrial zone, being so close to the port, gives it very special status. It's not just an industrial zone, it's actually one that allows the easy transportation. And so it's very different. And you talked about the supply chain diplomacy, definitely. You mentioned also there are lots of incentives that are involved. I'll come back to you with a bit of talk about the green hydrogen and Egypt's potential investment in this area. And the possibility of linkages on the investment side with India. Now we move to Dr. Shireen Nagar. Can we please have Dr. Shireen's presentation?
Yeah, so the indicator, please.
Now I
Is it
will
on
give
or-
Dr. Shireen a bit more time because he's explaining something that's completely new. Okay, and so please go ahead.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, the core of my presentation hinges on Egypt and how Egypt can be developed, or how Egypt is actually qualifying to become a major focal hub connecting 3 continents. And that is why I named my presentation The Golden Bridge Between 3 Continents. Why Egypt? A very simple question that everybody will ask. Why should I go through Egypt? In the very old days, in physics, we were told that metals are very good conductors, and they're good conductors of electricity and good conductors of heat. Well, Egypt is a very good conductor of everything, and it's a very good connector of everything. First of all, we have a brilliant geographic location that nobody can argue. Second, political stability, which has shown over the years, and considering all the countries around us are virtually on fire, we are just about the only country which is stable. Then we have the devaluation of the pound, though it has reflected bitterly on the local nation, but it has definitely become an attractive factor for more investments to come and more currency to come into Egypt. We have a modern infrastructure, and that modern infrastructure, His Excellency, the Minister of Transport was talking about this morning, so I don't need to go into all details, but this has been developed very, very nicely and has given Egypt an edge over a lot of countries in the neighborhood and even in some places in Europe. And we have the massive giant called the Suez Canal. I just need to mention something very quickly here about the Suez Canal in the absence of His Excellency Admiral Osama Rabia. Suez Canal is not simply a waterway. Suez Canal is a massive giant with shipyards, with an industrial background, managing tunnels, managing all sorts of facilities. Basically, the Suez Canal cities are virtually managed by the Suez Canal Authority, not completely, but virtually. The waterway is only one part of its activities, so we need not to undermine the Suez Canal Authority by saying it's simply a waterway, because it's much more than that. If we combine all that together, we can just say that this is excellent connectivity. Egypt in connectivity is simply second to none. Now, as I said here, we connect Africa, Asia, and Europe. And of course, Egypt has a lot to provide more than just the Suez Canal. Egypt has also got to have to provide the Suez Canal Economic Zone, which Professor Mohammed here has been talking about, so I need not dwell on it again. The Golden Triangle, which is a mining hub in Egypt, which is developing very rapidly. And the Golden Triangle is actually capable of producing all sorts of minerals we have never heard of before, minerals such as silica sand, for example, or quartz. Some of those raw materials can be very useful and very feasible for manufacture of semiconductors, which is something at the moment creating of a big war between China and America. So I think Egypt, being in the middle between the two, can qualify very nicely with the Golden Triangle, especially on the quartz. And our level of quartz purity from my university education days We have 3 sites. We have Abu Zanema, we have Edfu, and we have Siwa, where the purity of the silica and the purity of the quartz in those 3 areas goes way above Silicon Valley or any other producer in the world, which unfortunate that we are not very much known in that, but I think this is also coming because of the development of the Golden Triangle. Now, there are several routes that are connecting east to west, and there has been a lot of projects about them. There's the North-South corridor, there is the Iraq-Turkey corridor, there is the India-Middle East-Europe corridor, and of course, there's a One Belt, One Road. I'll go through those in very brief detail. Number one, talking about the North-South corridor. North-South corridor is there to connect between Riga and the Baltic, all the way down to India, Bombay or Kandla. It goes through Russia, and then it goes through rail ferries into the Caspian Sea, and then over Iran, and then into India, be it Kandla or be it Bombay. Now, there's a reference video which details it in full here, in case you. It's also attached to the slide. The distances are shown here. That Kandla to Moscow. Unfortunately, I couldn't see it from here, but Kandla to Moscow is 5,000 kilometers. It also has a lot of handling charges, multiple handling of the cargoes, and the ocean freight on the Caspian Sea. So this is the North-South corridor, and I'll compare them in a minute. The Iraq-Turkey corridor, well, we need not to talk much about Iraq and Turkey. How can Iraq and Turkey cooperate while they were fighting each other at the moment? So I think this is a dead duck, and it's not going to get anywhere, not anytime soon anyway. Then we have the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, which has been promoted and initiated by Israel. And it is Haifa, Jabal Ali, and then Jabal Ali to Kandla, or to Bombay again. I have only highlighted here the routing within the Middle East, which is really what concerns us as Egyptians. There are 2 alternative routes. One of them going from Kuwait via Iraq, Syria into Haifa, into Jordan, and then Haifa, and the other route using the old Hijaz rail tracks that are to be rebuilt, and it goes directly to Jordan, and from Jordan again into Haifa. All the distances are here again, and the description in full is on a video link. Of course, at this moment in time, I don't think anybody would like to go anywhere near Haifa with the situation, which is actually on fire, and let's hope it's going to be extinguished soon, at least to save those innocent people getting killed every day. Then we have the One Belt, One Road, and I have a very big objection against one belt, because that's not a belt. That's only half a belt. A belt is round, and this is not round. The so-called One Belt, One Road connects China all the way into Europe, and it goes through various destinations. It goes through Kazakhstan, it goes through Russia, and of course it goes into Eastern Europe and then Western Europe. There are several problems with this scenario, and the biggest problem is the current economic war between China and the West, and of course the Ukraine-Russian war, where you have sanctions left, right, and center. So you constantly get interruptions for that belt. The road, well, the road is maritime traffic, and we have at the moment this Houthi nuisance, which is really hindering everybody, and mostly the Suez Canal. So we'll come back to that also in a second. Now, the Golden Corridor, what we propose here is that Egypt is a Golden Corridor. Now, the idea of having a Golden Corridor, first of all, if you look at all the other corridors before, none of them touched Africa. And we've just been talking on the previous session, what a massive potential Africa has. Africa is filthy rich and unfortunately also dirty poor. And we need to be more in Africa. We need to expand more into Africa. A lot of targeting has been gone to Africa, like the Chinese, for example, tried to build up a hub in Djibouti, which never really came anywhere. Various other places in Kenya, and they are scattered. They are not really united. But Africa and Egypt, especially, represent a very big hub. And this is because I would take this a step further by saying, if we consider what is going on the economic blocks in the world today, you have the EU, you have Britain, which has suddenly found itself on its own with the Commonwealth, whatever was left of it at the time. And of course, we have America, the NAFTA agreement, and we have the Chinese and the Russians. And of course, India, which is in itself a continent, if we may speak, if we may describe it that way. Now, if we look at the advantages of utilizing this corridor, it's very simple. First of all, if you are calling from, say, let's start with England. England is a typical example. They have left Europe, and they are now desperate to expand their economic structure by reinstating their status as a Commonwealth group. Now, the Commonwealth is in Asia, be it India and Pakistan, and you have, of course, Australia, you have New Zealand, and you have Canada, but you also have East Africa. And the only way, these are so scattered away from each other, the head of the Commonwealth is sitting in London, whereas everybody else is scattered somewhere in the world, thousands of miles away, without real connectivity. Now, with the connectivity we are considering on the Egyptian Golden Corridor, you can come to Egypt, connect Egypt by rail into Alexandria or Abu Qir, which is being developed at the moment, Damietta, or even East Port Side. So you can go straight through. But then, when you come to Egypt, funnily enough, or advantageously enough for everybody, and for the British specifically, you have Egypt sitting on COMESA. And you also have the East Africa members, they are also COMESA members, but they are not only COMESA members, they're also Commonwealth members. And if you combine the two government customs advantages and trading advantages between Egypt, COMESA, and Commonwealth and Britain, then you are talking about the common denominator in all this play is Egypt, be it economically, be it logistically, and be it also in HR terms. And then, as the train goes forward into the Arabian Gulf or to the Arabian Peninsula, you are hitting a market which is a huge consumer market, the Saudi Arabia, Emirates, and Oman. There you will end up crossing into one of two places. I deliberately, of course, suggested it has to be two places because you have Kandla, which is the closest to the port of Sohar in Oman, and you also have Gwadar. And of course, Indians and Pakistanis never see eye to eye, so we need to separate any engagement between the two countries outside the two countries. So that's why the separation will need to take place in Sohar rather than on either of the two countries. Now, if we look at all this, then we have connected already Africa with Asia Commonwealth, with British Commonwealth. And then if we talk this, unfortunately, my indicator does not show on LED. So, if you envisage the map, you see the belt and the road, the real belt. I mean, that's the full belt. This belt will go through Egypt, and the road also goes through Egypt. The only intersection point where both belt and road meet is Egypt, nowhere else in the world. And that in itself is an advantage, because then you're talking about, with the presence of the Suez Canal economic zone, you have an industrial potential. And you have, with the Suez Canal Authority carrying 25,000 TEU container ships going through, the bulk of containers, the bulk of industrial components can be moved into the Suez Canal Authority, processed, assembled, and then sent out on either the belt or the road through Egypt. So the combination between the Belt Road link or the Golden Bridge, Suez Canal Economic Zone and Suez Canal Authority works like an orchestra, in my opinion. The same goes for linking Egypt with Australia, because there are usual common shipping lines going to Australia. And again, then you have connected the Australian Commonwealth to the British, Indian, Asian, African, and the head of Commonwealth. And the same applies for Canada. So really, you are building up for the British an ideal situation that will bring them as big, if not bigger, than the EU, which they have just left a few years ago. Then if we talk about other countries, like, for example, Europe generally, well, Europe, again, will have access to Africa. We'll have access to a massive Africa market. And this in itself is a very big advantage. And you will also be able to connect with India much easier on a micro scale, not a macro scale. The macro scale is the ships and the Suez Canal. The micro scale is the belt of the Golden Bridge and the Suez Canal Economic Zone. And I do emphasize the Suez Canal Economic Zone because there is a lot of potential there for production, and like, for example, CKDs, who completely knock down cars, can be being assembled very easily in the Suez Canal Economic Zone. I think there are already a couple of car manufacturers in place there. Indeed. And of course, the same goes for China. Okay. The same goes for China, because China-Pakistan Economic Corridor starts at Gwadar, which is only 18 hours steaming from the port of Sohar. So you can go all the way again to China from there. So you're really serving China, you're serving India, you're serving Australia, New Zealand, partly by land, partly by sea, and you're serving the entire European network. And you are really creating a full belt, because then you have the northern belt, and then the southern belt goes all the way around there. So there you have a belt, unlike the belt that exists at the moment. Okay, I've already spoken about all that. If we make a quick comparison, the belt we've already spoken about. North-South corridor, well, the North-South corridor, the poor Iranian situation. Iran is in shambles at the moment. We don't really know how far that's going to go. Jabal Ali, Haifa, we already discussed briefly, and also the Egyptian Golden Corridor. Whoops, working. This map shows really the comparison between the various routes. It shows the green one is the Iraq-Turkey route. The North-South corridor is in red. The half a belt is from China. It's a yellow, and the purple line is Egypt's golden corridor. And you can see that this golden corridor compensates for all other corridors, and it gives the users a much bigger advantage, a much better accessibility to markets which they probably would not have had in the past. I've already mentioned about the England Commonwealth situation. Of course, Asia BRICS and Africa will be the same thing. The future, of course, is in Africa. So there we already have it. Then when you say questions and answers, what can Egypt offer and how soon? Well, in 1805, Egypt was ruled by a gentleman called Muhammad Ali, who built the country to a modern country of its age. And in 2014, I dare say, another Muhammad Ali came by, and he's also building, but he's building much faster, although he's having a lot of resistance, but he's building much faster than many people would think. Is Egypt ready? Absolutely. When can we start? Yesterday. We can start immediately. What can Egypt offer? Infrastructure, which is modern. Facilities, very modern facilities. Transport network, which is developing. Rail, road, ports, and a lot more. Actually, we can do much more than that. Now, the indication here on the slide shows, I mean, in all details, what have we done in Egypt? How does the transport network look in Egypt? So if you're interested, there is a link there as well. Finally, I would just like to say, well, the sun is rising. It's dawn for the world. This is a wake-up call. And I think in Egypt, we have been very slack on our international public relations, but I would dare say now it's dawn, and it is a wake-up call to the world to wake up to what Egypt is doing. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Shireen. And I like very much also your poetic approach to things and the dawn and the artistic part. Okay. It is actually a very interesting presentation, and I thank you for it. The Golden Corridor, I think, is important and worth talking about. We have a full belt. Okay.
Yes.
The world is a bit too fat for our belt still, but we're gonna, give it a bit of a diet in order to fit. Okay, Professor Harsh, we've given you a golden belt, so you should let go of all initiatives and stick to Egypt. I mean, this is the conclusion is very clear, and we are ready. Absolutely. So go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you, Abla, for making me part of this very interesting conversation. I realize I'm the odd person out here because
you're creating the connectivity. Come on.
I think there is so much expertise here, but I think it was fantastic to hear the last three presentations and to just get a sense. And I would agree that I think Egypt is perhaps not telling its story very well, because it's not known that if this is the kind of ambition and aspiration that exists here, then why is it that we are not talking about this story, but we are talking of other stories? And I think in some ways, the whole argument coalesces around one fundamental change that we have witnessed over the last few years. And that is in some ways coming together of very disparate geographies. And I think, when you say that, look, and I think this was part of some of the earlier panels, the conversation, that look, the center of gravity of global politics and economics has shifted to what we now call the Indo-Pacific. I think it requires you to think of the global landscape in a slightly different order than perhaps we are used to. And this melding and merging of geographies that started perhaps with the rise of China and how China then coalesced it created this one belt and one road with all the challenges. I think it speaks about this new aspiration to link these disparate geographies. And I think a lot of what has happened in the last few years and in the context of India trying to position itself as at the heart of that conversation, that India is the country that perhaps brings together Indian Ocean and Pacific Oceans together. And India's definition of Indo-Pacific is very expansive, from the eastern coast of Africa to all the way to Oceania. And that's a wide expanse. And I think all that was, propositioned here in the last few minutes was an argument as how can we link these disparate geographies together, because that's where the next stage of globalization is going. And that's where, in some ways, the fundamental vulnerability of the first phase of globalization revealed, that you have massive geographies which were not part of that globalization 1.2. So you really were not part of that conversation altogether. Now that you are looking at it and redefining it, and I think for all the challenges in some ways that Chinese version has proposed, it is also thanks to China that it allowed the world, or it forced the world to reckon with this conversation that infrastructure and connectivity are the missing parts of the globalization debate. And unless you bring them together, there is no way of spreading globalization across the world in a manner that was equitable and fair. And I think that conversation that started, I think, has now moved to a point where we are looking at these multiple, corridors and what they can do to individual countries like India and Egypt, but also to individual, massive geographies like Indo-Pacific and, of course, Atlantic and the Mediterranean. In some ways, Egypt sits at the heart of that geography as well. So I think, what perhaps looking at it from the Indo-Pacific comes across is that we have now had lots of debates on One Belt, One Road, BRI. We have lots of conversations on some of these other propositions that were mentioned. INSTC, we have been talking about it for decades now. It has not moved. So I think it's also something that we need to consider, that a lot of these projects, a lot of these debates have been with us for so long that we forget how difficult it is at times to operationalize these ideas on the ground. And INSTC is one good example where India's investment and I think and India's engagement with it has continued, but without much to show. So far, we're actually clutching at straws, and therefore, when IMEC was proposed at the G20, India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, it also allowed you to reimagine this link between, in some ways, Indo-Pacific and Europe. Now, for the last over 150 years, it was Egypt that has been at the heart of linking Asia and Europe, and now suddenly the world was reimagining something different because of certain things, political possibilities that existed at that point, not now, but then. So now, and I think not having Egypt as part of that conversation was perhaps a drawback. Now, I think when you look at that and how the challenges that continue to feed into that the IMX prospect today allow you to also think of Egypt's positioning in this connectivity belt altogether differently. And I think some of the ideas that the Golden Corridor, perhaps very ambitious, but also strikingly in some ways devoid of some of the geopolitics that consumes many of these corridors. And one has to take into account the reality of geo-economic contestation between two big powers that is going on. You have to acknowledge the fact that all kinds of connectivity, whether it is digital, whether it is transport, whether it is basic multimodal, or whether it is economic, that is now contingent on how geopolitically aligned we are as a group. And I don't think at this point the big powers are geopolitically aligned. So in some ways, the pressure on countries like India and on Egypt would be, are we being forced to choose between the two? And I think that's a very, very, very important point from India's point of view. If you go back to the Indo-Egyptian history of non-alignment, it was about creating that space for making choices, that we don't want to be told by others what to do. The whole idea was, let's have our own space, and within that space, we should have the strategic autonomy to decide where we want to go. And I do think that India and Egypt, and nations like India and Egypt perhaps are well positioned to devise that debate even in this space, where increasingly, and if we are pragmatic, then I think we are honest, we have to acknowledge that this pressure would come to us, that look, these are very different points of view. And in some ways, when IMEC was proposed, many had positioned it as a counterpoint to BRI, to One Belt, One Road. Now, if you're living in that space where geopolitical contestation is seeping into these conversations, then is how important it is or how imperative it is for countries like India and Egypt to also offer that alternative vision, that we are actors in our own right, that we have agency to define our relationships with multiple partners. And therefore, this project, and I think, again, congratulations, it seems to be talking about the world as a whole, that we are not making a choice. We are not in that space of making geopolitical arguments. We are also providing alternatives. And I think increasingly resilience is what we are talking about. And this offers a good argument for resilience in the global economy. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Harsh, for this. And your messages are very clear. Actually, not having Egypt in the conversation is wrong. So it's important to have it back. And I'm glad that it is back. Okay. You mentioned very eloquently the geopolitical conflicts and how, in reality, they would affect the realization of some of the visions. And yet, this does not mean that we should not work on them, because we do have our space. And then if you actually think about countries getting together, even like within the EU, okay, it always starts with businesses. It always starts with business interests. Business interests build up to impose on governments the type of collaboration that is needed, okay? And so the geopolitical conflicts, even though they, exist, okay, I think there is room for, when we make the case, and Egypt, what Egypt was missing, really missing, was actually making the case for what it can do, what it can provide. Okay, whether in terms of road connectivity and all types of maritime and so on and so forth, as presented by Dr. Shireen, or by the potential of the Suez Canal economic zone. And part of the connectivity is to have investments in the Suez Canal economic zone and benefit more from the Suez Canal. So thank you for this. It's extremely important, and we're going to follow up on it as ECS and ORF on this issue. Sabir, okay? Now that you're listening to this, I'm just curious, how much of this is new for you? You are in the shipment business, okay? How much did you know about the advantages that exist in the Suez Canal zone and the Suez Canal, and those ideas about corridors and comparing them? What do you think?
Yeah, well, thank you for the really amazing presentations. Of course, I'm very, very familiar with the SC zone. We are investors within it. We see the huge potential, and I think we're just scratching the surface. And Engineer Shireen's presentation, I absolutely loved, because he clarified something that we're living and that we know, and it makes an enormous amount of sense. So we, as a private company, we work in forwarding, and we work in trucking. And so immediately when the Red Sea crisis began, and the whole issue of Bab el-Mandab, our immediate action, even as a private company, we're not talking about, being part of a company-wide, a country-wide corridor or anything. We immediately introduced a service that we're calling a transit service from Mediterranean ports to Red Sea ports, and then on to the GCC and China, connecting GCC and China to Europe, as an alternative that saves time instead of cargo going all the way around the Cape of Good Hope. So if we reach that conclusion immediately, it's something that makes complete sense. I just want to say that Engineer Shireen was saying that we're ready immediately, and I agree with that, but I just want to add a level of nuance to that. I think that in order to make this a success, we need 4 Ps: place, and in place, I would say location and infrastructure, and that's what we've really been working on, and it exists, and it just makes the best sense. But also people, process, and I'm going to add today what was said, publicity. And in terms of people, I think that we have a lot of youth. We need education. We need the universities in the SC zone. We need the vocational and technical training, and we will create an enormous amount of jobs around this. In terms of process, I think that we need to continue to work on regulations, on simplifying the business environment, on integrating our systems with the countries around us that we would like to be part of that corridor. And publicity, yes, definitely letting people know that Egypt is here and what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And actually, you summarized in four words exactly what we need. We are ready, but we do have to do also a lot of work. And on the publicity, it's extremely important, so that there is a response and there are negotiations with all parties to do it. Let me ask Dr. Mohammed Abdelgawad, if you tell us a little bit about green hydrogen and the investment potential in the Suez Canal economic zone, and a bit about also the type of Indian investments that can take place in the zone. Again, instead of talking about trade through the Suez Canal, okay, we can talk about actual production in a very place that's close to the Suez Canal, so we would be cutting significantly on cost. So a bit on the potential there, okay?
Thank you very much, and of course I will reflect on the question.
Do you need the presentation again?
Yeah, just to explain a few points. But to capitalize on what has been mentioned, the 4 Bs I think already applied when it comes to the Suez Canal economic zone. You have the place, and you have the people, and we are investing, by the way. Currently, we managed to attract 3 key projects when it comes to the vocational training and innovation. And one of them is already started the operations. Publicity, we need to do more, of course. And the best way to announce and to promote through the business and through the success of the business cycle and through a better facilitation. For green hydrogen, and this is part of the key industries or sector that we are trying to attract. I don't know where is the presentation, because I need to show a few slides. But before going to the green hydrogen for India, and I think this is part of the question, of course, our relation, economic relation and trade relation with India goes back to 2 years from now. But of course, there are lots of potential that we need to enhance. When it comes to the Suez Canal Economic Zone, we already managed to attract Indian investors within the Suez Canal Economic Zone, who currently are in discussion of finalizing a very important deals, but I will not mention the details, but I will show you the location because this is part of the localization and the diversity of the investment that we try to attract within the Suez Canal. This is one of the areas that I think it will be the hub for more Indian industries. One of our industrial zone was what we call the East Ismailia, and East Ismailia is a prime location, and this is on the east of the canal, and this is one of the areas that we managed to attract Indian investments over there, and it's a pioneer industries for localization of the industrial development in terms of feeding industry into a specific mining sector, and of course for silicon production and others, and to benefit from the area and the basic characteristics and the mining related indicators for that area. This is number one. Number two, of course, it's not only the bilateral relation, but after joining the BRICS, there is also lots of potential areas of collaboration between Egypt and India. In the green hydrogen, there is already existing discussions with an Indian investors, and in the power generation as well. Yesterday, I had a very long discussions with an Indian company, one of mega project that I think it will lead into a huge impact, inshallah. Speaking of the green hydrogen, this is for all of us just to visualize the green hydrogen industry. This is the full supply chain and of the green hydrogen and the related industries. Of course, SC zone in Egypt is the hub for green hydrogen and localization of the green hydrogen industries. But out of the SC zone, as you see, renewable generation, of course, to be generated, connectivity through the national grid, and then you'll start the process within the Suez Canal Economic Zone. Power and the desalination plant after the connectivity of the renewable power or the renewable energy generation, then the power substations, green hydrogen production, and each of those pillars is in itself another investment opportunity. And this is what also we try to attract, and we managed to attract many investors in each of those areas. Of course, nitrogen production, air separation process, then goes to the ammonia production, and this is a very important pillar for the fueling, of course, within the shipping industries and for the green shipping as well. Utility corridor, which we already made a huge investments as Egypt and as SC zone, and storage facility and bunkering within the port in itself. So this is an explanation for what we do to localize and to, of course, to attract the green hydrogen related industries within the Suez Canal Economic Zone.
By the way, very, very impressive operation. Just that time does not allow us to go through the whole thing.
This is the industry, just before less than 1 minute, just for all of us. This is the mainstream related industry, and this is back to how we can attract Indian and others to do investments within the Suez Canal Economic Zone. And for each of those streams, we have a pitch back, detailed one, in order to enhance the discussions and to show the value proposition for each of the industries within the Suez Canal Economic Zone. With that, I'll thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Harsh, any comments on this?
No, I think certainly green hydrogen is something that Indian investors are looking very carefully, and we have had, I think, initial discussions both as part of even IMEC on green hydrogen, because it had you had multiple digital green hydrogen, multimodal connectivity, as well as undersea cables. So there is a lot there to unpack. So competition, I think, but that in any case, geopolitically is constrained at the moment. But this looks much more promising.
I'm going to open the floor for comments. Okay, we have exactly 5 minutes, actually not much. So are there any questions or comments, please? Okay, here, start here. The lady, and then the professor. We're going to take exactly 4 comments. Go ahead. Let's make it brief and precise. Okay.
Just very quickly, the very interesting, alternative is the India Middle East project, which was, signed, or the MOU was signed in 2023, September 2023. Leaving Egypt outside of this project cannot be an oversight. It is probably intentional. So the question now is it economically and commercially viable as an alternative or not? Because what we are seeing now and what we have seen from the 7th of October until now can be interpreted in one of 2 ways. Either it is going to bury this project forever, or it is the first step of implementing this project.
Thank you. No, wait. We're going to collect all the comments and then come back to you guys. So do write down what you want to say. Lady, please.
Thank you very much. And just very quick comments. I agree totally with what we said. Egypt is not telling the story right, and we need the publicity. So maybe my question is how we can publicize all of this. And even when His Excellency was speaking in the morning, I mean, let's be honest, many people in Egypt are not aware of the value of what is happening. So we need to market this. This is something. Another thing, I love the presentation, the passion you put in it, Mr. Nagar. And I believe this belt is also a way of overcoming geopolitical, because it's a way of connecting people culturally. Europe, after this connection of the roads, it makes people and cultures, I mean, we can speak a lot, but this can be a way. So another way of promoting this, it's not just economic, whatever, but a means of promoting peace and understanding and cultural, acceptance of others in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor David, and then I will come here. Sure. Let's have a mic ready on this side.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. But there are a few things that I didn't hear, particularly from Egyptian scholars. The African Union Agenda 2063. I think it's important when we talk about this corridor and how it is linked to a vision of the continent itself. So that Egypt cannot operate this major infrastructure outside continental vision. I think that is critical, as well as other initiatives that are taken, whether it's in G20 and other global. I see you just mentioned more of the China part. You did mention getaway and the Europeans, Americans, if they're on. But I think for me, it's very critical that you raise that independent of others, how the strength of that corridor, independent of others, because you don't want to take sides. The moment you start saying this getaway, this corridor, it's better than the belt, then it becomes a problem. It's why not? So I think that neutrality it's required here. And lastly, I endorse the previous question that belts are not neutral. They're not value laden. They are value laden. Ideologically, corridors and belts it's not only goods moving, the language moving, culture moving, norms and value. So I think that strong Egyptian, African, Arab identities of Egypt need to be imprinted in the very same corridor. Thank you.
And thank you very much for your question. I think this is really major. Here.
I stress the importance of bringing in the African dimension, because I understand that there is a plan to build, I don't know, a railway link between Alexandria and Cape Town. So I think this dimension should be brought in. I appreciate very much what Dr. Pant said about locating this question of the corridors within a broader geopolitical context. And on this understanding, I remember that the India corridor, I think the agreement was signed while President Biden was in New Delhi. And I know that the India corridor goes through the Arabian Peninsula, Israel, and the Mediterranean, excluding Iran and Egypt. So from a geopolitical perspective, does this mean that India is taking the side of the United States against China, because China has the alternative route, you know, the Belt and Road Initiative? So from a geopolitical perspective, does it mean that this is a choice? You are joining India and you are taking a stand against Iran and Egypt.
Thank you very much. Dr. Ibrahim, do you want to comment? Okay. I think I'll come back to the panel for feedback. Let me start with Professor Harsh, and you have very clear questions.
Yes.
Okay, so let's answer them very clearly. Are you taking sides here? I mean, this is dangerous. Okay, Africa. Okay, well, the vision of Africa, is it in what you're proposing? All right, so please start.
See, I think India does not support One Belt, One Road. India has problems with One Belt, One Road because it passes through what India considers its own territory in Pakistan. So India was the first country to say we are not going to be part of One Belt, One Road. So if that is the question, then it's very transparent that we are not part of One Belt, One Road at all. I think on the question of other transport corridors, if you see INSTC, for example, it goes through Iran. So India is part of INSTC. I think the question that most countries need to ask today is, are we building resilience in the connectivity corridors that allows us, for example, if there is problem in one corridor, do we have enough resilience in our economic management of the global order so that we can continue our economic activities? And I think India's, for example, having this multifaceted approach allows India that option. Now, whether Egypt being part of IMEC or not, I think that's a much broader conversation given the broad stakeholders around the table. But I don't think, despite America or Saudi Arabia or UAE being part of IMEC, it means that they have cut off their relationship with Egypt. Egypt continues to be a partner of all of these countries. Similarly, India and Egypt continue to be partners. I don't think from India's vantage point, the idea was to keep Egypt aside. I think the question was, does this corridor give us something as an alternative to what we already have? And I think in this sense, Suez Canal and IMEC became the two mechanisms for operating in the larger global trading regime. So I don't think that from India's vantage point, it was a question of this or the other.
Thank you very much. Dr. Shireen.
Yes, well, the doctor's question about will this India-Israel corridor be alive? I doubt it. There are several hostilities that have been created over the past year, and I don't think there will be any hope of that being revived, not in the foreseeable future. This is number one. Number two, if you compare the distances, which is actually it's on my presentation, distances and costs and so on, you'll find that despite the fact that the Egyptian corridor is longer, yet it is much more economical and it is much more diversified, and it opens up a lot of more markets rather than just the Arabian market and the Jordanian and the Israeli market. No, it opens a lot of markets en route, being mainly almost the whole of Africa. And if you look at Africa with at Egypt relationship with Africa, it's very important because you're talking about the whole of COMESA, and there are a lot of agreements of COMESA agreements that Egypt can always extend to the users of this corridor. I don't know how that politically will work or according to contracts, but I'm sure this would be extendable. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yeah, please.
Very quickly, Vision of Africa is part of what we do in terms of enhancing and attracting business to the Suez Canal, not only to attract companies to target the African market, but also I have multiple cases for investors who already started to establish their businesses within an African market and come to invest in Egypt. And then they have this sort of, again, supply chain connectivity between the establishment within the Suez Canal Economic Zone and the establishment within one of the African markets. This is number one. Part of the resilience, and I think this is very important, what I mentioned about that sort of new Suez Canal through Sokhna, Alexandria railway network. And this is very important pillar to enhance the competitiveness and the resilience of the Suez Canal and doing business with, within the Suez Canal Economic Zone. Additionally, and very important, and I know I participated even within the negotiation and of the Africa We Want Agenda 2063, and the key pillars and the industry that I already showed on the screen goes directly into the heart of the industrial development and localization of the African market. Finally, it's not only about COMESA, but also the integrations. And here, the rules of origin is very important, the local content. And this is what other industries looking into it. The African Continental Free Trade Area is also another very important pillar to enhance and to attract investments to the SC zone and through SC zone to Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Abir, any final comments?
Yeah, I don't have much to add because I think that everything has been said, but I will, emphasize the Africa angle. I think that that is very important. I believe I mentioned maybe in my introductory remarks, the new road to Chad. I think that we need to have more and more connectivity, and that is one of the huge challenges in also building up African trade, because the continent is doing most of its trade with countries outside the continent, while we're not trading enough in between ourselves. And a huge part of that is the transport and logistics, the cost of it, the cost of shipping from one African country to another, some of the geopolitical tensions that are preventing some of these roads that are planned for becoming reality. So we have a huge amount of work to do in that direction.
Thank you very much. And just following up on what you said on the limited connectivity with Africa, you know that we were occupied by Britain, and Egypt and Sudan were one country. And despite the fact that we were one country, the railways, when they were built in Egypt, they were different in size from the railways that were built in Sudan, which is very clear. The intention was not to connect these. They didn't want us to be connected. They had their world. We are now in a different world where our part of the world is more visible and hopefully more alive, and we are going to make our connections and higher visibility for the global south. Thank you so much. It's been an incredible session. It took some time from the lunch, but the lunch is there, so you'll go and eat now in preparation for the next session. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.